Hi.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, how many people were at the our earlier AngularJS talk this morning? All right.
Good.
So, Joel kind of hurt my feelings, and I said, "You're going to regret this someday." Well, we decided to switch places. So, I'm going to offer the commentary, and he is going to drive on the code demos.
I can't guarantee no tears, but the title of this discussion is going to be AngularJS Architecture That Won't Make You Cry.
Or make you cry less.
Make you cry a little less, I think, is probably more truthful. It's JavaScript, so we're all going to have a few tears. This is Lukas Ruebbelke. He blogs at One Hungry Mind. He tweets at Simpleton. Contributed to AngularJS, author of AngularJS in Action, which is in MEEP status, right?
Yep.
Is that true?
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah.
This is, well, not me, but my name's Joel Hooks. I blog at joelhooks.com very infrequently, tweeted at jhooks, and I'm a founding partner at egghead.io. We present little bite-sized training videos for web developers, a lot of the focus on AngularJS.
Actually, don't call them videos, they're lessons.
Lessons.
He yells at me all the time for that.
It's true. Brand matters. So for this, we really want to get into the code. Earlier today, we looked at an example application, and what you'll find as you go across the internet is these kind of trivial, contrived examples. They'll be in a single file. In the worst case, in like an index.html with inline script tags, and many times with a single JavaScript file that's driving them. One of the biggest factors of creating an AngularJS application is, how do you organize your code? What are the workflows? Where do things go, and how do you proceed? So that's what we're going to talk about today. These are my opinions. I hold them pretty strongly. That's kind of what I guess I get paid for, is to have strong opinions about things and enforce them on projects. So take them with a grain of salt in understanding that these are, in fact, my opinions, and there's other ways to do things, but I'm going to show you what's worked for me and my teams. So with that said, I'm going to jump right over into WebStorm and kind of take a look at what we looked at this morning. So we have a simple AngularJS application here.
Can you guys see this okay?
Does this show up? Bigger font?
Okay.
Back corner. And in this case, let me see if I can run this real quick. I've cheated a little bit and jumped ahead. Oh gosh. So anyway, I can't, I don't think I can actually, can I run it from this, Lucas? Let's see, but I can. Right, so this is kind of just a simple, contrived example, and we're not going to get away from that, but it does a lot of things that Angular does. We have two-way binding. We're using routing up here to deliver these different routes for our separate pages, home, about, and experiments. We have this message here that we're able to update, and we're able to carry that across, and this is actually shared. This is shared via an Angular service. Several people came this morning, but who's just learning AngularJS, just starting out, that hasn't used it much? So I'm making some assumptions here, just to kind of warn you. So try to pick up keywords, but I'm actually making some assumptions based on a small amount of AngularJS knowledge. I'm not going to get into the how-tos and the basics of the functionality of Angular. I want to talk more about, like I said, organizing your code. So
And if anything is fuzzy when we're done, in terms of like, well, what did you mean when you said this or this term? Just catch us up here. I'd love the opportunity to kind of clarify that. So if anything just doesn't make sense, that's what we're here for. So.
All right, so this is the application running, and I'm just going to kind of briefly go through what we have here in terms of the application itself. This is where we're declaring that it's an Angular application named website. Oops. Website's
Not anymore.
Website's a module. It's located in website.js in the JS folder. You can see that module declared here. And inside that, we have kind of this monolithic single JavaScript file that contains our module declaration. We only have one module declaration. We have a config function here that actually defines our routing. So this is telling Angular what to load when we go to each of these different URLs, about, experiments, home, etc. And then we have the actual applications controllers inside of this module as well. So we have a controller for about, and this is providing about with the kind of the state that it needs in terms of its title and its body. It's also accessing a state service to grab that message that we're displaying and we're able to carry across and persist between each of our controllers. The experiments controller, a home controller, the actual state service, this is where we're storing that message. And that's where we end in this one. So, like I said, this is something you'll see pretty typically. You'll see all these controllers stacked up. You'll see these long files. You'll also see a folder called partials that contains all of our HTML snippets. So, for instance, the about page. These are all relatively simple, but it has the title and the body, and then this horizontal rule, and then we actually get into this section about with the message. So what I'd like to do is actually take this, organize it, and add in some automation to make life easier and allow us to actually get that organization that we're looking for. So to accomplish that, I actually have a separate branch that I did this on called Refactor, and we'll give you guys the link to this repository so you can check it out on your own. And right away, things jump around. What I don't want to do, and previously when we were doing that, the index.html is in the root of this project, assuming we're going to serve the entire folder. In my production applications, that's, I don't think, ever the case. What we have is a distribution folder, or in this case, a build folder. And what I want to do is work in one structure and then deliver to my web browser the structure that it understands. So I have one structure that is what the browser understands, and then as a developer, I actually want to organize my code a little bit differently. So that's what we're going to look at. And we have several folders here. We have data. I have a little server that's here for local development. And then we have the source folder. And this is where I, as a developer, will actually spend most of my time is in the source folder with my source code. And this is where we can find our index.html. Now, how do you bring all this together? In this case, I'm using Gulp.
Apparently I'm alive.
You are. That's
Sorry about that.
Meeting. Has anybody used Gulp or Grunt for automation? So at the end of the day, building modern web applications, you have to have some sort of task runner or automation under the hood. In this case, I'm using Gulp. I also use Grunt. They both have kind of give and take advantages. I'll use, as long as I'm using one or the other, I'm generally happy.
So Joel, could you take 10 seconds and elaborate on Gulp versus Grunt? What are some of those advantages or disadvantages?
Grunt, as much as I love it, as much as I have actually like 80% of a book written on Grunt. When you open a Grunt file, it's hideous. It's like you look at it and it makes your eyes bleed. It doesn't really look like JavaScript. It really kind of takes you back to Ant or Maven or something of that nature. It's this big kind of configuration file. Gulp is actually pretty nice because you open it up and frankly it looks like JavaScript. And that's a big thing for me. And you write these tasks. So these are all my tasks. I have like copy index, copy assets, copy the app.js, etc. They're all kind of named and self-explanatory. And these go through and allow me to, work in this folder, and as I work, it's going to copy them over. But when I look at this, it does not make my eyes bleed. It's still, you still have to understand what's going on. On the other hand, the Gulp team is extremely opinionated and wants things done in a certain way, and they'll kick plugins and say you basically can't use them because they're not done in the specific way that they want it to work, which generally doesn't affect me. So I'll use the tool, and I know Grunt really well by now, having written the book and used it. So for me, it's either way. One or the other, choose one, whatever the team agrees on. I think you'll be all right. Their tools cross over. They have all of these plugins are generally written for both. And this is a pretty good stack. We've got a pretty good stack of things here that we're using to make this happen. For the most part, these are copying and doing some light compiling. In this case, in the previous app, it was using just straight CSS. I don't like to use straight CSS. I either want to use less or Sass or some other preprocessor to make, to kind of shift the balance of my love-hate relationship with style sheets over to the love side. Not completely, there's still a lot of hate involved there, but it's just not what I do. So we have a plugin that'll take that and actually convert it to our CSS. I'm also running a server, I mentioned that, so there's a node server. I believe, like developers, as developers, we should own and operate our own local web server that we have complete control of, regardless of the back-end stack. In this case, it's Node, just because it goes along really nicely with this, but I've worked on full Oracle stacks or .NET stacks, and it can be a real challenge for web developers or designers to have to maintain the full Oracle stack, like a full ATG Oracle stack locally. So I'm a big advocate of having just a little tiny server here that we can use and use that to serve locally and serve up mock data and do that sort of thing. So Gulp is handling that too, just insofar as when I type Gulp, it just starts the server. I don't know what's...
Is it running already?
Yeah, it's running already. Here.
Sneaky.
Too many terminals. Oh no, this one's going to be. And Skype started up.
Is that a Gulp task?
No, there is no start Skype Gulp task. That does not exist. All right, so I apologize for this, but I'm going to have to go to Activity Monitor. There she is. All right, if that didn't work, I was just going to crawl under the desk and cry for a little while and let you guys entertain yourselves for the last 30 minutes. All right, so I'm actually serving this application now. Previously, it was in a single folder and everything was relative paths, so I just was able to, you could run it from the file system effectively. I could load that index. I use the WebStorm's built-in web server to run it. In this case, you could probably actually do that by running from the build folder. But I want to have a server that's running in the background. That's my local development server. It just serves off a local host. So I'll load this application up again. All right, so we're effectively back to where we were before. So we still suffer in this particular layout. All I did was move everything over and move it under the source folder. So I created an app directory in here, and this contains the website.js. I moved our images, so we have our assets over here. I'm keeping these HTML partials here for now. And then, of course, I mentioned I took all of the CSS and just tossed it into a .scss file and then gave it a main. The index changed a little bit. One of my big beefs with JavaScript development in general is the amount of string manifests that I have to maintain, from script tags inside of my HTML to like imports in terms of modules, either with like CommonJS or with Angular's own module system. It seems like there's always some place that I have to cut and paste a string and move it over and leave it there and then remember to update it if something changes, and I constantly forget. So what I did was templated the index.html. So it goes through, looks inside of the build folder, and automatically grabs any sort of CSS files, and on the flip side, it grabs any of the JavaScript files in the project and automatically adds them to my HTML, so you can see that kind of in action over here.
Pro tip.
Right, so
Thanks, Joel.
that's it in here, and I actually had to build that custom for Gulp and Grunt, in fact. There wasn't anything that did that just out of the box, so there was some juggling to have that. This Gulp file is going to be available for you guys. It makes actually a pretty good reference in terms of the basic core foundation of what you might need. And the last thing that it does is monitors for changes. So anytime I change anything, you can see down at the bottom, it updates, runs, rebuilds, copies whatever's changed. It's incremental, meaning it's not watching everything. It isn't going to rebuild everything. It just rebuilds what it needs. So I spend this time on gulp and automation in an Angular talk because it is absolutely critical. You can't really get past basics of Angular until you start adding these tools in, because there's just a lot of horrible things that humans should not have to do on a daily basis. Like, you shouldn't have to spend 45 minutes of your day copying files, making sure you got them all copied, making sure stuff got renamed, making sure it's all in the right place. This isn't stuff that we need to focus on. We have a hard enough job as it is, so let's let robots handle most of that for us. So, you know, whatever tool you choose, choose one and use it to its full advantage. All right, so the next thing I want to get into is organizing your project and kind of how this all comes together. Going from this single monolithic JavaScript file into something that would be a more standard production style AngularJS application. So looking at this, and you can pretty much, in this case, look at this config block and kind of use this as the determination of what modules do we have. And we only have three. We have about, we have experiments, and we have a home module. So I'm going to come over here and just start refactoring these a little bit. So I'll just go alphabetically. I think they're alphabetical. They aren't.
Sorry.
All right, so I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to create an about.js. And I'm also going to move its partial template. So I want to move its HTML down here, so I'm going to say about.tpl.html. I use TPL here just to differentiate between other just kind of standard HTML files. And this is what I've configured in my gulp build. So gulp is going to go and it understands that this is a template file, and I'll show you why that's important in just a second. So I'm going to say Angular module. I'm going to create a new Angular module. It's a submodule of our larger application, which is called website. So I'll add its name in here. This is basically like a namespace. And then in this case, I just need to copy over a couple things. One, its controller, so I'll just grab that. I'm just going to slim down that app controller and start moving this stuff over here to make it a little more concise. And what the advantage here is, if I want to work on the About module, I know exactly where I need to jump to. I need to open the About folder, and it's going to be right there. I'm not going to have to go into app.js and start scrolling up and down. And this expands, you know, as large as your application is. You might have submodules on this submodule and so forth, so you can kind of stack them down into one another. But I'm able to grow my application by features, and I don't end up with, you know, one, as we have here, which I would never recommend stacking them all in a single JS file, or dividing them up into, say, a controllers folder that contained all of your controllers in one place. I want to work on About. I want it to be isolated. I don't want, you know, merge conflicts because I'm working on a different module than another developer on my team, but they happen to be in the same file. That's another thing that can really bite you. So I'm actually just going to copy this over as well. All right, so come back to website. Since it's no longer handling the About route, and what I did there was copy this config block, and because I built the About module, I'm actually going to allow it to configure its own routes. Something that you'll see, that I've seen time and time again when I drop into an Angular project that's been going for a little while, is they'll have all the routes. Maybe they don't, you know, they aren't doing this and they've divided it up a little bit, but they have a config block that looks something like this, but with all different words.
Stop it, I'm going to cry.
And this, you know, this is no joke, and this is what, you know, you'll see a lot. People are configuring it all in this one place, and, you know, and this is even, one, it's the same word, so it's actually easy to look at. When this is all different words and different modules and different routes, it's like, it's difficult to look at, it's difficult to find anything. I'll erase that. There we go. If we do it this way, if we divide our application up into these kind of atomic modules, now it controls its own routing. What it effectively has become is an independent application. Go ahead.
Why you don't divide like different files, for example, controllers, config, services, different files?
like having my routes like a routes, like about routes, basically. Is that what you mean? The question is, if I'm saying this right, why do I not divide these up further into additional
Yeah,
files?
like a controller, each component can be quite big.
Yeah. So he says, why don't I divide this up and have, say, a controller file and a config file, or a lot of times people will call that the routes file, so you'd have about-routes.js. Honestly, I don't need to. One, if the controller is getting to an enormous size, which they tend to do, it's a code smell. If you walk in here and your controller, one, has 20 dependencies being injected or is extremely long, it's a code smell, and it means that it should be divided up further into different modules. And usually I don't need to. To me, like, what I'm looking for is a balance. I want to divide this up. I want to have enough separation between my files to make it easy to comprehend, but I don't want to have so much that I have to go digging around through 20 different files to find what I need. For the most part, you know, my controllers are small enough, like this might get to 100, 150 lines, which would be a big controller in my book, would be, you know, about that, which is still enough to manage. And when I hop in here, this is the module, right? Like this is the module. The module basically consists of its configuration, or its routes, or its states if you're using UI router, and then the controller. So the other things that come into play, and in this case we have like the state service, which is common functionality, and it's going to go in an entire different place and will definitely get its own file. So it's just it's really a balance.
So I'll jump to kind of towards the end of our presentation. I'll just go ahead and say it now, is that if your controller is getting very large, that is a code smell. Is that controllers, you should favor fine-grained code over coarse-grained code. And so it should be very small and specific to the view that it controls. And then from there is, if it starts to get big, you either need to abstract it out into another controller or maybe another state, or if you're doing a lot of like domain logic, pull that into a service or a module, or a model, sorry, but then that'll get extracted out into its own file. So it's very common, and I'm sure we'll see this in just a moment, where you'll have like a models folder and you'll have like, you know, users and these different things that actually is encapsulating that specific business logic. So, but if it's fairly small and you are favoring fine-grained code, it shouldn't be more than, you know, 100 lines of code usually, and it should be fine.
So I'm just going to quickly run through these and do the same exact thing for experiments and the home. I say quickly, it's actually my sad typing skills. I don't recommend doing this at home. Cut and paste always bites me. And just grab this controller.
You want your experiments template to be a .html?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. And I'm going to pause. I think that's a great question, and it will let me address something real quick. So what I've done in this case is, yeah, and this does need to be .html.
Good catch.
You're
Thank you.
I have a typo. I actually want to show you why we're doing this to begin with. So I've moved this over, and what I really want, you see this in AngularJS applications and examples a lot. I see it in production applications as well, where they'll have a partials folder or a templates folder, someplace where they basically shove all of the HTML for the application. What I really don't want to do, and I just am generally, like, I work away from like having to hunt anything down. When I want to work on experiments, I want to open the experiments folder, see its JavaScript, see its unit test, and see its HTML template that's associated with it. I don't want to have to open this up and go, oh, okay, and then jump over here and search through the 75 different HTML templates. They're alphabetical, but it's still, you know, a lot, like a cognitive load for me to have to go and even sift through that. And it's not much, it's seconds. It's seconds out of my day, but it's also like a break in my flow. If I'm thinking experiments and want to work on experiments, if I can just jump in here and start working, that's fantastic. And that's what I want to do. So right now, I actually have part of the gulp build is copying all of these partials over. So I'm going to kill that real quick.
And while he's doing that as well, is by having it in a single folder, it increases portability. Is that if you ever need to abstract something out, like let's say something becomes kind of full-featured and you want to pull that out into maybe a reusable component for another project, is if you have pieces of it strewn across your larger project, then you have to kind of go through and pull that all together. Whereas if it's in a single kind of directory where you have your JavaScript, your templates, and even your spec, then it's quite a bit easier to actually pull that out and promote it to kind of its own thing. So it increases portability and maintainability as well.
So it would get kind of weird if I was just copying those over and then was trying to access all those templates, like my URLs might start to get a little weird, that sort of thing. It's pretty easy with the partials. I can keep all these in one place. And what Angular actually does when you have these partial templates, and you'll notice in these routes, it actually addresses this template URL and points to the partials about.html, which needs to change so it knows where they're at. And in this case, we'll have just about and about.tpl.html, and I'm just going to fix that one for now. And I'll save this. My gulp build should be running. Let's see if we got what I expected. Point. So now that I moved these over, and I made that .tpl.html, there's a plugin for gulp and grunt as well called HTML to JS. And this is a specific plugin for Angular development. And what it does is basically walks my tree, walks my application, my source folder, looks for anything that matches the pattern that it's seeking, which is .tpl.html, takes those and actually compiles them. I use the word compile pretty loosely here, but takes them and actually turns them into JavaScript templates. Like this is something you would absolutely never want to do as a human being, but it's actually very efficient for AngularJS. What this has done is taken those HTML templates, which would have had to been loaded each individually over the wire, so it would have been a single HTTP request to load the partial. And what happens inside of Angular internally when a template is loaded, it actually puts it into what it calls a template cache. So it converts it into a JavaScript string and stores it, it's just a key value pair. It has a name, and then this would be the value. So we're just kind of short-circuiting that and converting it to JavaScript right up front. This is something you can uglify and minify and compress. And now you'll get all of your templates in a single HTTP request. You can divide them up more granularly if you wanted or needed to for an application. In this case, I only need the one. But you can see that it's gone through and it's found those. It's actually giving them a URL. So when I request that URL, it's going to understand that and give it to me. I'm able to truncate the app off the front of it because it's not really needed here. But now I have these partial templates available to me through the template cache, and it's kind of a little bit of a performance boost in that you're not making so many HTTP requests, and you can compress them a little better than you can with the straight HTML. So it's a pretty cool tool, and most importantly for me, it allows me to work in this fashion. It allows me to organize my modules how I'd like to organize them. It's still template URL, and you'll notice the only kind of odd thing here is that I've taken app off the front, but otherwise it's experiments, so it's namespaced, and then you just access them at the path level.
And that could technically be anything, it's just matching that string up.
Yeah, if you're curious, I can. So it looks like this, it's just a glob format basically, goes through and looks for anything of that extension. Gives it a name and then throws it where you ask it to. How are we doing time-wise?
We have about 10 minutes.
So I'm just going to add the next one real quick, add our last guy here. I'm actually going to wait on the home controller just to make sure we have time. So in your mind's eye, imagine that we move the home controller as well. It's going to be its own module. Eventually we'd want to do that. But with 40 minutes, I want to make sure that I get to everything. So the next things that we have in here are some shared objects. State service is used by each of our modules. And you can see over here, we're injecting that into experiments. We're injecting that into the about controller. So we're able to use that and share state. It's delivering a message. Each one of these controllers is able to query that and figure out what the current message is. So the question becomes, where does that belong in terms of this modular structure? The way I handle that is by creating, inside of my source folder, I'm going to actually create a comment folder. And inside of here, in my opinion, state service is actually a model. It's modeling the current state of this message that we're passing around. So I'm going to create a models folder, and then I'm going to create a state service.js. So in this case, I am going to be very granular with my file. This is only going to have a single call in it, and that's to the service. So I'm going to say website, common. This is kind of like package naming or namespacing. And I'll say state service. So I can really, at this point, just grab this wholesale. It doesn't have any dependencies. It's a little factory. It does a simple job. I can grab that, come over here, put it in here, and now I have something that a module that's actually reusable. This is super portable, and this is what I kind of refer to as promotion. So I'm taking something, I'm building it locally. Now it needs to be shared, so I'm promoting it up to common. I do not ever import a module, a feature module, meaning about or experiments. Like about would not import experiments, and experiments would not import about. If they needed to share functionality, I'm going to abstract that into some sort of model like this. And then I'm going to promote that up to common. And the next line of promotion would be something that's more cross-project, right? Like we want to build a library that all of our teams are going to use for all of our projects. And that frankly takes a different kind of thinking. Like when you start building frameworks or tooling like that, you really have to kind of think about it in a different way. But at the same time, you're starting to think about that, even when you're just thinking about sharing between two modules within an application, because frankly, these modules are small applications. If I'm doing my job really, really well, I can yank this out, import it as the ng app, and it should run. A lot of times that doesn't work out, but in the best case scenario, this is something that can be completely moved over to the side and run as its own application. And you kind of see that in Angular a lot. The directives are much the same. They're little mini applications. This is something I always forget. I do this refactoring, and then I forget to import this. Because we're using a module system, we have to tell the application that this actually exists and it's one of our dependencies. So I usually do that with this container. So I'll have common.js and websites.common. And then in here, I'll put that in here. The reason I'm doing it this way, and then I'm going to take the common, like this container here that I've created for common pieces, and actually put that inside of my application. I'd also need to do this for experiments. These are string manifests as well, and I constantly forget to copy over these strings and keep track of these manifests. I haven't figured out a way to eliminate them in this particular scenario, but once I do, trust me, I will.
Let's jump to the slides when you get a chance.
Do what?
Let's jump to the slides when you get a chance.
Thanks.
We've got a few more minutes.
All right. So we've done this in a couple different, just to give you a quick overview. We're not complete. This refactoring has a few more steps. One, we have an experiment service. I think this is just used locally by the experiments. So if that was the case, it's used in one place. So I'd start and have it over here. And then lastly, there was an experiment directive. And I do this the same way. It's used in exactly one module. Nobody else depends on it. So it's going to get copied over there as well. Now, if it was a directive that was used in multiple modules, then I would promote it up to some sort of components folder in my common area. But since that isn't the case, I'll just move it right here for now. So we've gone and we have a much more modular structure. It's easier to reason about. If I want to work on any of these functions or functionality, I can quickly and easily. It's a pretty good start. This expands. This I can delete completely. And you have really the start of a real application. We have a couple of slides just to kind of wrap this up. So I'll move over here.
And so this is, we're just going to go through kind of some few high-level rules of thumb. So I think that if you can take some of these and start to apply them to your code base, I think you got your money's worth, in my opinion.
And speaking of opinions, if you guys have opinions or disagree or have other thoughts or want to argue with me about this stuff, nothing makes my day than arguing with other nerds.
Sadly but true.
Software architecture.
Yeah.
It's my favorite thing. So automate. Architecture is a lot of things. It's largely about organization and naming. If you can get those things right, you're really on the track to success. Most of the time we don't. It's a struggle and we constantly have to improve. Tools like Gulp and Grunt are the path to that. If you have some other favorite tool, I'd like to hear about it. These are the two main ones that I see in use lately.
So avoid logic and views, sorry, if you don't mind.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Is one of the pet peeves I see in Angular is you'll see like ng-if, and you have this big logic structure. Like if this, and this, and this, and then this, is you're basically putting imperative logic into your view. Abstract that out into a function and put it on your controller. So just say ng-if should show this, or have some kind of self-documenting method, because you can bind to expressions as well as simple values. And so really, if you are doing, I really don't even like to do one logic structure in my HTML, because how do you test it? And so if I'm doing like ng-if and then there's some kind of expression that evaluates something, pull that into your controller and put it there so you can test it, and just bind to that expression and not the logic.
And we didn't talk about it, but UI Router is a good solution to this problem. It's a library that replaces ng-routes. It uses state-based. Usually when you have an ng-if, it means you have a new state, right? Like it's a switch. So one state or the other. That suggests that we have a new state, and UI Router facilitates that. Use it. Don't use ng-route unless you absolutely have to. Avoid markup in your controllers. Self-explanatory, but I see it all the time. Dollar calls to jQuery inside of your controller means you're doing it wrong. It is a serious code smell. Don't do it. If you have to use jQuery, it should be in a directive. It's a communication problem. Do I need to use events? Do I need to use binding? Do I need a model to communicate between these two? Probably. You should not call and manipulate your DOM from your controllers. It is a slippery slope, and it'll put you in hell 3 months from now. Fat model, skinny controllers. I steal this line from Rails. It's true here. I think it's true in most cases when I deal with model view controller. Controllers are mostly stateless. They can have some sort of intermediary, strictly view state. Persist state in your models. Extract that out, put it in a model, inject it around. It's the way to go. Testing. Does anybody test?
Everybody raise your hands, please.
Your boss is watching.
Yeah.
Quality over quantity.
You're on camera.
Screw their metrics. It's all about quality. If you have quality tests, you'll enjoy them and use them. Your coworkers will too. If you're focused on quantity, everybody's going to hate them. You'll have broken ones. Just ignore those. They've been broken for months. That's not good tests. Be functional. JavaScript is really a functional language. I ran into a lot of trouble when we came in, and we were coming from ActionScript background, so we all wanted classes, right? So we get in there and we implement John Resig's simple class, which is great. He's a super smart guy. It was awful at scale. We were dealing with JavaScript, and we're trying to shoehorn it into something that it's not. Just embrace it. It's pretty functional. Embrace that. I really love libraries like Lodash and Underscore to add a little bit more functional flavor on top of my little map and reduce and all that fun stuff.
Real quick, Functional JavaScript is one of the best JavaScript books I've ever read. Michael Fogus, who wrote that, is actually here. So if you see him, go shake his hand and give him a hug for me. It's incredible.
Organized by features, not class type. I touched on this. This is where we had home and about. Maybe you're using RESTful entities and you want to organize that way. What you don't want to do is have a folder called controllers and stuff all of your controllers in there. It's really mind-boggling once it gets to a certain size. Honestly, I just want something that's nice and small that I can look at and reason about as a human being. I'm not a computer. So here's some resources. Egghead.io, which is my website. I actually give you a little discount subscription if you have any interest in that sort of thing. AngularJS in Action, which is Lucas's book, and he's taken a project-based approach with this book and using a lot of these things that we've talked about in practice, but with a large-scale application, so that might be something you want to check out too. Adventures in Angular is a podcast that he does something with.
I do with Aaron Frost, John Papa, a few other people, different guests, so it's just a lot of fun, but a lot of kind of, you know, you go and read the docs and you kind of get one picture, but actually kind of understanding what's going on in the community and hearing creators talk about their different things is pretty awesome. So it's just kind of a good resource into the Angular community.
And then the brain is where he blogs, the One Hungry Mind. He blogs a lot, I don't really.
So I try to blog once a week, so if you guys are having any pain points, please just hop on there, send me a message. I try to take that stuff very seriously and convert those into blog posts for the community.
I take a rant-based format for my blog, and I have several good ones up there related to Angular, so if you're interested in that kind of thing, I express my opinions strongly there as well. So feel free. I have to wait for my muse, my ranty muse, so that comes in frequently. But I think that's it. I think we're about out of time anyway, so yes?
What's the GitHub account for that?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good question. So if...
The question is, what is the GitHub account to the repo that we went over?
It's Lucas's, and can you even see that? Probably not. Here, I can make this visible. I do it the hard way.
Yeah. So Simpleton is my username. If you go to my GitHub repo, there's a lot of Angular stuff in there. This is Angular website routes is what I used in the morning talk. But then there's a refactor branch, which is the work that Joel and I did for this talk. So it's really handy. For one is, if you're getting into Angular, check out the master branch, and you can kind of see things together. And I believe that's why things get put into a single file, because it's kind of handy to look and kind of see these pieces composited together. But eventually, you kind of have to evolve, and so that would be on the...
I actually always work like that. I
Well,
start in a single file.
We're talking about a master programmer.
Hardly.
Hardly. So anyways, so start with the master, go to the refactor, and you can compare the two. I think just seeing that transition is pretty illuminating from kind of basic step 1 to step 2, step 3, et cetera. Yes, sir?
I've developed fairly complex paths, and I found that I ended up going down the road of making too many directives. Do you have any guidance for, like, at what level should you cut it, like leave it as HTML versus convert it to a directive?
I mean, like repetition?
Repeat the question.
Okay, so the question is, when is too much in terms of making directives? Can I have too many directives? The answer is probably yes. You can always be too granular, and then it just becomes kind of confusing. If you're reducing repetition and you're taking, code that's in multiple places and reducing it to one directive, you're on the right track. If you're just doing it because you can, and it's not making, not reducing your code repetition, then you're probably, don't need that directive. And if you're thinking, well, I might want to, that might get duplicated later, wait till it's actually duplicated and then do it. Like premature optimization, that's old school, and it applies in this case, I think.
And so that even goes back to the question about putting things in a single file, is that I'm not advocating doing something for the sake of doing it. It's ultimately we want to do things better and faster, and also ensure that we're able to do that in the long run. And so, there's nothing wrong with starting local and then kind of promoting it as you get to the needs, and it expands and it becomes necessary to do so.
That's like when you see a controller that's really getting kind of big. Well, is that really 2 modules? Now it's time to break off and make a new module. It's not like, you can, to some extent, go and say, well, I know I'm going to need these 3 modules, so I'll just go ahead and make them. But a lot of times I'm just working, and I'll break them off and move them over. And it's always for me, how will this better help me 6 months from now and the rest of my team understand this application? Because it's so hard. Like, that's the hardest thing. Like, drop a new guy into an application with 100,000 lines of JavaScript and tell him, okay, well, go fix some bugs, and that's how you're going to learn this application. That should be fun for you for the next week. It's not fun for anybody, much less the new guy that's trying to figure it out. If you do this, you can be like, well, how about you work on this feature and go focus on this one section of code that's so contained and you can understand it because it's small and something that's contained, and then work out instead of like.
And at least for me, sorry, go ahead.
Fix this Heisenberg that nobody knows how to fix.
Is I don't always know what I'm going to end up with. I think everybody, develops in an iterative fashion, where a lot of times I'll have an idea, and it'll kind of come to fruition, but I'm like, oh, this could be better. And so I just think because we develop best when we are iterating over something, is it's really hard to project, like this is going to be the end result, and kind of have a waterfall mindset, if you will, of like this is the finished product and we're just going to go there. Is that it's really helpful to start iterative and then just promote and refactor and just make it better over your iterations.
You don't do it all on the wiki first?
I tried that once.
Yes.
Any more questions? Yes, sir.
In this application, I guess you're concatenating all the JavaScript files.
So I didn't do that in this. So the question, am I concatenating all the JavaScript files?
Yeah.
This is my dev.
Oh,
okay, go ahead, sorry. I'm actually not, though.
How would you handle the third-party libraries? Is that set up?
Well, they're done a couple different ways. One I'd either, when I do go to my production build where I would concatenate all these, because they're not right now, they're all just loose. I, a lot of times, will just go ahead and concatenate them in with my own files because I'm freezing them anyway and it doesn't really, in this case, they're all loading off a CDN, so they're all just script tags. Or you can concatenate vendor and do vendor.js. That would be another option.
I've seen it done that way quite a bit. That's usually what I'll do is I'll delineate like a vendor, I'll concatenate all my vendor stuff, and then I'll have my app stuff.
I know in my production apps, I have to have absolute control over everything. I'm not going to rely on some third-party CDN to, I might rely on our CDN that we use, but like, Google's Angular CDN, I'm not going to use that in my production. I use that for demos, but that's about it. So.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
In this example, where would you put the test for about, like, as about stuff?
So
I would put it in the about folder, and I'll actually add a test, and I'll commit, because I'm going to commit the finished product here, so maybe 15 minutes after this, I'll add a unit test in there as well, just to have that in there, because I think it's important. But I would do it, I'm going to show you, nobody's booting us out. Is somebody waiting?
Is there a dance party after this? I think they want a dance party. They started clapping on cue.
So it would be like this, about.spec.js. And this would be my Jasmine test. And in much the same way, it would get stripped out when it's moved over to the build folder. And it would strictly be there for testing. But what I want to do is not have to travel up the tree, look in a test folder, travel back down. Oh, there's my test. If it's right here, people might actually use it, which would be a miracle.
So does Carmen just look for like the spec?
Yeah, so it's a glob. So it's just it's looking for .spec or, people use different things. I use .spec in mine.
I saw some half hand raises over here. It was.
So I like the idea of grouping by type or by feature, not by type. But you're recommending a module per feature also?
I mean, yes, generally. I mean, it depends, I suppose. Do we need a module per feature? I don't know. I mean, that's kind of. Yeah, and it might change though. Like it might evolve over time. This might not make sense as we grow. This, about might actually be several modules that it's contained to, it might be sub-pages within that, which UI router handles very well. In that case, I'd do like, like contact or whatever.
It's an art and a science, and that part is more art than science. Yeah. I mean, what makes sense for you? What are you comfortable with? And then, pick that, and then, stick with it for yourself and across your team, and be consistent.
Yeah, and if we're talking about repeating code like this, like boilerplate stuff, you're gonna have to live with that. There's a lot of that. Here's what I recommend, is using an awesome IDE like WebStorm and getting these guys going. Because I haven't found a way. If you find a way around that.
That'll save you a lot of time and a lot of errors.
It's actually built into WebStorm. There's also snippets for Sublime and other stuff. I think we're out of time. We're probably holding up there.
Sorry, whoever's speaking next, I really apologize. Thank you. Microphone drop.